Today, it is perfectly legal to discriminate against criminals in nearly all the ways in which it was once legal to discriminate against African Americans. Once you're labeled a felon, the old forms of discrimination, employment discrimination, housing discrimination, denial of the right to vote, exclusion from jury service, suddenly legal. As a criminal, you have scarcely more rights and arguably less respect than a black man living in Alabama at the height of Jim Crow. We have not ended racial caste in America, we have merely redesigned it. And like a lot of people, I was in deep denial. Even as I was working as a social justice advocate, as a civil rights lawyer, I thought I knew what was going on. I was disturbed. I was even appalled by the high numbers of black men cycling in and out of our prisons and jails, but I thought, well, that can be explained by the high rates of poverty and bad schools and broken homes, the legacy of inequality. Somehow it didn't occur to me that black folks had been poor for a long, long time and uneducated for a long, long time, but nothing like the system of mass incarceration had ever existed before. Somehow it was easy for me to rationalize what I saw because of the prevailing myths about this system of mass incarceration that are fed to us in countless ways, that I was fed in many respects in law school, and that were fed through the media. But I had one experience that finally began to open my eyes, that shook me to my core. It involved a young African-American man who was about 19 years old, who walked into my office and forever changed the way I viewed not only our criminal justice system, but how I viewed myself as a civil rights lawyer and advocate. And at the time, I was directing the Racial Justice Project for the ACLU in California, and we had just launched a major campaign. And this young man walks in carrying a stack of papers, a thick stack of papers about this thick. He had taken detailed notes of his encounters with the police in Oakland over about a 9-month period of time. He had descriptions of every stop, every frisk, every time his car was pulled over and searched. He had descriptions of every encounter as well as names of witnesses, who was there, who could corroborate what the police said and what they did. And on top of that, he had names of officers, in some cases even badge numbers of officers. He just had an unbelievable amount of documentation and detail about this pattern of stops, searches, harassment he had been experiencing by the Oakland police. And the stories he was telling were corroborated by other stories we had heard coming out of his neighborhood about what the police were doing there. And then he said something that made me pause, and I said, what did you say? What did you say? Did you just say, you're a drug felon? We believed we couldn't represent someone as a named plaintiff in a racial profiling suit if they had been convicted of a felony, because we knew that if we did, law enforcement and the media would be all over us saying, well, of course the police should be keeping their eye on him. He's a felon. He's a criminal. And we knew that we wouldn't be able to put someone with a felony record on the stand as a named plaintiff in a racial profiling case without them being cross-examined for an hour in front of the jury about their prior criminal history, thus distracting the jury's attention away from the law enforcement conduct and turning it into a trial about a young man's prior criminal past. And so I'm sitting there looking at him saying, did you just say you're a drug felon? And he gets quiet and he says, finally, yeah, I'm a drug felon, but let me tell you what happened to me. Let me tell you what happened. He starts telling me this long story about how he'd been framed by the police, and the police planted drugs on them, beat them up, and I'm just saying, oh, I'm sorry. And I tried to explain to him why that was the case and how I could understand that why it would seem unfair or wrong. Then he starts insisting upon his innocence. I'm innocent. I'm telling you, I just took the deal. I just took the plea deal because they told me if I just took the deal that I could just walk. I wouldn't have to do a day in prison. If I just took the deal, I just get felony probation. That's it. I am sorry. I cannot represent you. And then he becomes enraged. And he says to me, "You're no better than the police. You're no better than the police. The minute I tell you I'm a felon, you just stop listening. You just can't even hear what I have to say." He says, "What's to become of me? What's to become of me?" He says, "I can't get a job anywhere because of my felony record. Anywhere." He said, I can't even get housing. He said, I can't even get access to public housing because of my drug felony. Where am I supposed to sleep? He said, I sleep in my grandma's basement at night because nowhere else will take me in. He said, how am I supposed to take care of myself as a man? He said, I can't even get food stamps. I can't even get food stamps to feed myself. What's to become of me? He says, good luck finding one young black man in my neighborhood they haven't gotten to yet. They've gotten to us all already. And he snatches all those papers up, all those notes, and just starts ripping them up into tiny little pieces. He's throwing them in the air. It's just snow and white paper in my office. And he walks out yelling at me, "You're no better than the police. I can't believe I trusted you." Well, several months after that, I'm doing a public access television show that was broadcasting live out of his neighborhood. I was doing public access TV because we were trying to organize several thousand people to get on buses and go to the state capitol to protest the governor's refusal to sign racial profiling legislation. Well, immediately after that show goes off the air, I was broadcasting live, the minute it goes off the air, he comes bursting into the studio carrying this dirty potted plant. And he comes rushing up to me, and he's emotional, on the verge of tears, and he comes rushing up to me, and he thrusts this plant in my arms, and he says, "I'm just here to tell you I'm sorry. Just here to tell you I'm sorry. I've been seeing you on the news. I've been seeing you out there trying to fight for our people, trying to do the right thing, and I shouldn't have treated you like that. I shouldn't have spoken to you like that. So I would have bought you some flowers, but I still don't have any money, so I snatched this plant off my grandma's front porch. Here." Hands it to me. And then he turns around and takes off. He goes running out of the building. And I go chasing after him. He jumps into this broke-down car and disappears. Well, several months after that, I'm in my office. I open up the newspaper. And what's on the front page? The Oakland Riders police scandal is broken. Turns out that a gang of police officers, otherwise known as a drug task force, had been planting drugs on suspects, beating folks up in his neighborhood, and who's identified as the main officer, one of the main officers charged with planting drugs on suspects and beating folks up? Well, it was the officer that he had identified to me as planting drugs on him and beat up him and his friend. And it really was only then, I'm embarrassed to say, that it was really only then that the light bulb finally started to go on for me. And I thought to myself, he's right about me. I am no better than the police. The minute he told me he was a felon, I just stopped listening. And that was the beginning of me asking myself some hard questions of myself as a civil rights lawyer and advocate. How am I actually replicating the very forms of discrimination, marginalization, and exclusion I'm supposedly fighting against? And I also started asking some questions about the system itself. Why was it that we hadn't been able to find a single black man from his neighborhood they hadn't gotten to yet? What was really going on? And that was the beginning of my journey of asking myself and others a lot of hard questions, doing an enormous amount of research, and listening more carefully to the stories of those cycling in and out of our prison system. And what I learned in that process was that my great crime wasn't in refusing to represent an innocent man. My great crime was in imagining that there was some path to racial justice that did not include those we view as guilty.